Hello, and welcome to Outside the Zeitgeist, an opinion podcast presented by Mook Media. Please be aware that the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of the host platform. Outside the Zeitgeist is funded by people like you, for some reason. And now, here are your hosts, Greg and Charles.
All right, welcome to Outside the Zeitgeist, episode 21. I am your resident misanthrope, Charles.
I'm your resident skeptic, Greg.
Cheers, Greg.
Cheers, Charles. Don't forget to dislike, subscribe, share, comment, and dislike the video to show that the feeling is mutual.
Very good, Greg. You're memorizing it.
Absolutely. Once I come up with it, it's easy to memorize.
Okay, and so let's get into today's nightmare fuel and weigh in on all of that. So the first thing we got is apparently Kevin Spacey is
hold up. Before we get into all this disappointing stuff.
Oh, what do you got?
Really disappointing stuff. I was watching a video, and apparently the fifth state of matter was sustained for a solid second in outer space.
The fifth state of matter. Which state of matter are you referring to? You're talking about Bose-Einstein condensate?
Yes.
Yeah. That's already been, that's been
They've done it for 1,000. The way the guy described it is that a full second is 1,000 times longer than they'd been able to sustain it on Earth for.
Yeah, because I was going to say they were able to obtain that in the early aughts.
So I just found it very interesting. I thought it was a worthwhile mention, and it makes me still positive that science is a real subject that gets stuff done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the real science, not people talking bullshit saying it's science.
Moving on to bullshit science.
Well, that's kind of really a discontinuation. But the first thing we had was Kevin Spacey going back to Hollywood because, everyone after they serve their sentence in the popular court of, we got to kill everyone, gets to go back to Hollywood.
Cosby.
Except for Cosby. Although,
it's probably because he's black.
And then, of course, I don't think Kevin Spacey really served anything. His accusers had mysterious things happen to them.
Yes.
Much
like those people of who dealt with the Clintons.
Mm-hmm.
Very mysterious dealings.
Yeah. So, have you heard about this movie, Greg?
I heard about the movie. I think it is hilarious. It feels like a troll to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's true. I know it's true. I know it's so true that I'm going to make a movie about it that actually nets me a profit just because you dared to try and get me for it.
Yeah, though apparently in the movie he's falsely accused.
Okay.
So
I mean, I'm still on the fence about anything that happened because there was no real trial, was there?
Right. No, there wasn't a trial at all.
I can't say one way or another whether he is guilty or isn't guilty.
But that, and realistically, in anything, you have to go by statistical probability, right? What do you think is more likely the case versus what do you think is not? So when you have a situation where somebody's accusers all just, or at least their public accusers all just happen to not be around anymore. What's that line by Garrick from DS9? I believe in coincidences. Coincidence happens every day. I just don't trust coincidence.
It's a good line. I just keep thinking about one of my favorite movies of his, The Usual Suspects.
Oh, yeah?
And the next time something happens, he will be one of the usual suspects.
Yeah, I was actually going to punch in the Big Kahuna the other day because I was like, what do I want to watch? And he was in that with Danny DeVito.
So. Is that why you didn't put it in?
No, I decided to watch... I can't remember now.
That's a shame.
But, yeah, and that kind of goes to the thing of, separating the art from the artist and whatnot, because, let's face it, he has played a lot of good roles and does have a lot of acting talent.
This is why I always say, I think Tom Cruise is a despicable individual. He has a lot left to be... he's just a terrible human being.
As most people are.
Right? But I respect his ability to act.
Mm-hmm.
He does an incredible job acting.
Yeah.
Regardless of how terrible of a person is.
Yeah.
That's why I ignore anything that has to do with Michael Jackson, and I just listen to the music as it's music.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's all I can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll still watch Jerry Maguire. I'll still watch Seven. You know, I'll still watch. You know,
deplorable people still create sometimes very amazing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it goes. It's you know, like I was talking about before, you know, a while ago. You know, what can you get out of something versus the intent of what goes into it. Right?
Sure.
But speaking about what you can get out of something, apparently Alexandria Griffith-Cortez wants to get something out of her horrific wartime experiences.
What wartime experiences?
You know, the one that didn't happen when she was in a building far away from all those people that decided to go into the Capitol.
And
or, the Citadel.
Then she claimed that there was some sort of scare and it had to be evacuated and crap of that nature. She's getting therapy, I hear, for PTSD or something. I don't even know. I mean, she just keeps making shit up left and right.
I mean, maybe that's what she needs therapy for, the fact that she keeps making shit up left and right.
Honestly, I think she came to the realization, oh shit, I'm actually Trump. Except the younger female version of him.
Yeah, well, one can only hope or cry or whatever.
It's funny because she actually voted in line with Trump against the Democrats on almost every time something like that happened.
Yeah, but at the same time, too, you had, you know, back when it was the whole Trump in office and Orange Man bad, you had all the Democrats voting to give him more spying powers and more military and this, that, and the other
because
thing.
It benefits them. Once they get rid of Trump, which they did, they get to use all the things that they passed.
Well, yeah, if they got rid of him. But
okay, if he'd gotten another term, he'd eventually been gone, and whether or not the particular Democrats who seem to be in charge right now were still there, overall the party would have access to those particular things. So my thought.
Well, I mean, Trump still advanced all their agendas, just not. It just he just didn't. You ever see the movie The Hudsucker Proxy?
No. What is that?
So the Hudsucker Proxy is where this company is failing, and they put this idiot in charge of the company, and the idiot actually winds up having a good idea that makes the company a bunch of money. So that's kind of the same thing with Trump. They probably realized that. I mean, one of the things that inspired him getting elected is they probably realized that, you know, hey, the American people are unhappy. You know,
we're still unhappy.
Yeah, true. But, you know, Trump at least
made us seem happier.
Made a bunch of people like feel like stuff was happening, but really behind the scenes it was stuff going on for the establishment.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a direct parallel, but it's a close enough parallel. You know.
Let's move on.
Okay. Well, speaking of things going on behind the scenes, you know, and we can talk about what's going on with the Federal Reserve and everything.
Yep.
And I'm mentioning about the repo operations, and apparently the repo operations have gotten up to the point where they're putting out, I believe the New York Federal Reserve website said $400 billion in overnight operations.
Wow.
Which is basically just creating $400 billion overnight.
That's insane.
You know, it's there's a lot of like little details that goes into it, and they're all bullshit details meant to cloud everything. But that's basically what it is. So, you know, and we've been talking about this with like inflation and the dollar.
The dollar is just gonna.
Yeah, and then you have like cryptocurrency and everything. What's going on with that? Which, you know, you have Elon Musk, who's, you know, he's supposedly this bad boy. Bad boy in the sense of like cryptocurrency. He's like the promoter of cryptocurrency, but he's, you know, you saw what happened with Bitcoin and what he did. He's just as big as part of manipulating things as everybody else.
I'd like to just point out that
GameStomp,
is back up to $254. Viewers, I'm not lying. It is on my phone. The stock market reports $254 as of the close of today. I've been tracking GameStop for the past few weeks, and even though the media has refused to talk about this,
Yeah, there's been a resurgence in the meme stocks.
absolutely.
So
AMC is going back up.
Mm-hmm.
GameStop, I think there was another one I was keeping track of. Nokia, I was keeping track of. They haven't gone up as much as they did, but I am astounded that nobody is talking about this amongst many other topics. Hopefully, us talking about this will get it to you. And you'll be able to do your research on the subject too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like it's another push by the Wall Street Bets community.
Absolutely.
Which is, it's pretty funny because overnight you had these people that don't have a whole lot of money individually, but collectively they managed to come together and put a dent in the wallets of all the hedge funds and everything like that. And of course they're getting the shit end of the stick by actions in Congress and whatnot.
I think anyone who believes that the either party is innocent in this is in the wrong.
Yeah, I mean there's no good guys. I mean, first off, GameStop. You know, you look at GameStop and AMC and whatnot, and like what
they're failing businesses. GameStop has to reinvent itself. AMC will have to reinvent itself. It doesn't. I don't really. I mean, it has the net. Don't they also have the channel as well? Is it owned by someone else? I think.
I think they used to have a channel, but I
think still have the American Classic channel.
Doesn't China have a big interest in AMC as well?
Possibly.
I don't know. I can't remember, but it's interesting to watch what's going on. I don't think it's going to help any one of us.
Not unless I invest in that right now. I take $2,000, I toss it at GameStop, and then I lose all the money.
Yeah. Never buy on the rise.
I was watching this really good skit by Ryan Long, and it's like he's talking about, I have a magical ability to predict when GameStop is going to lose money. I put all this money in and it just goes down. And then it climbs back up and put all this money in and it goes down. And his wife comes out, his fake wife in the scenario, and says, she starts bitching about him spending all this money. And he's like, well, I don't complain about you and your hobbies. I do yoga. Yours was a mortgage on the house.
So let's see what else we got. So I've talked before about the anti-BDS legislation, and this person, Abby Martin, who was going to have a speaking engagement in Georgia. The whole thing with that went on with that was she was being told that she had to sign a thing basically disavowing BDS. And some are saying like a loyalty pledge to Israel or whatever. Although I don't remember her saying that specifically in her interview back a couple months ago. But so the case went to federal court, and the case was presented by this organization called CARE, and they won.
I think I've heard about that organization before.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what they are, but they won the case against Georgia, saying it was a violation of rights because it was part of legislation. I mean, of course, it didn't really help that right after Abby Martin was denied this speaking engagement, they changed the legislation for to say that anybody that had a contract greater than $1,000 had to do all this stuff, anti-BDS stuff. But they changed it to, I think it says $50,000, a contract worth at least $50,000 had to sign all this stuff. But what's it called? It was found to be unconstitutional, which was the expected outcome. But it just goes to show, when people, and I was thinking about this the other day. You think about like
Go on.
the whole saying of like Jews running the world and whatnot. Now, of course,
it's a stupid statement.
Well, it is, but at the same time, if you look at it through the lens of all Jews run the world, right? It's the same thing as like white supremacy, right? Like every white person is a white supremacist. But you do have, who are some of the most influential financiers of the world. You have the Israeli government. You have the Rothschild family. And the Rothschild family, which is involved in pretty much every central bank.
This is, I get that statement, but the way it's used,
no. What I'm
is
Right, and
absolutely terrible.
Right, what I'm saying is I'm looking at it from a different angle, where it's just a few select people, because you look back at 9/11, you had the dancing Israelis, and then you look what was going on in Syria with the Golan Heights, and how the U.S. is always a firm backer of whatever the fuck Israel wants to do, and this, that, and the other thing. It's not that I'm saying that it's true, but I'm saying it leads credibility to that notion, right? I mean, the fact that you have legislation in different parts of this country where it says you can't talk bad about this country. Now, granted,
Where is that?
what, the legislation?
Yeah.
In Georgia. That's what the whole case was about.
That was other than Georgia.
I think I can't remember the states off the top of my head. I'd have to look and.
So I'm very uninformed on any of this stuff. I still don't understand what BDS is.
So BDS is boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Now,
yes, I still don't understand. I understand the words.
Right.
I don't understand what the actual.
All right, shut up so I can explain
is.
it. So remember apartheid South Africa?
Yeah, I don't know what apartheid is either.
Okay, so apartheid is when you have one group of people, when you have tiers of citizenry, where you have one group of people who have a certain amount of rights, and then other group of people that has lesser amount of rights.
Hold up. That sounds like America. We have the rich people with one set of rights, and we have anybody else that's not in the 1% with a lesser set of rights. So please be more specific.
Well, this is explicitly written into the laws. So in the case of South Africa, it was...
Okay, so it's a country where there are laws that are purposefully racist or ethnicist or something.
Right, where it creates
so China
layers.
is the same then?
Yeah, I believe China is the same. But Israel is the same as well. Like I was mentioning with Red the other day, she and I could not get married because I'm not ethnically Jewish.
Okay.
Right? That's why Israel is an apartheid state.
Okay. Now, is that necessarily a bad thing?
Well, I mean, if the interest is equality, then yeah.
Then yes. Is there any way it can be seen as a good thing?
Well, I mean, everything has its benefits and detriments, so it depends on what you consider to be a benefit.
Okay.
Right? So...
I only ask these questions because the way I keep hearing people use that statement, it sounds like you should be outright against this type of stuff.
Well, yeah,
no
I mean, apartheid is typically for ethnic supremacy.
Okay.
All right, that's the goal, right? Which is also like what Israel is explicitly. It's an ethnic supremacist state. Actually, it's ethics. Its goal is ethnic theocracy. I can fucking speak.
Theocracy?
Ethnic theocracy. Yes.
So is the rest of the Middle East as well the same way?
Yeah, you have that a lot with the Middle East as well.
Okay.
Now here's the thing, right? So boycott, divestment, and sanctions was used to help end the apartheid in South Africa. Now boycott and divestment, we all know what boycott is. Don't buy shit. Divestment, don't invest in. But sanctions, I'm not for, because that's a form of financial siege warfare.
What is sanctioning?
So sanctioning is you're preventing money, basically preventing money from going in and out of a country. Right, so this is what you have going on with Venezuela.
China, you're preventing money from going in and out of China.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It prevents them from engaging in trade with other countries, right? Which is devastating. I mean, we see what's going on with Venezuela, because Venezuela can't get a lot of stuff because they're being sanctioned.
Now, wouldn't that require that there be multiple countries engaging in the same thing?
Yeah, but everybody just bows to whatever the American military might want.
So it still means that multiple countries are working together. Mm-hmm. It's just the United States is enforcing it.
Yeah, it's the hegemon of the Empire of American States.
Okay.
So and that's the thing, right? Because
seems wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I boycott and divestment, fine. Sanctions, I'm not for in any case, but when we talk about like Israel and Palestine and whatnot, and people want to say, oh, well, the Palestinians and their belief system is not much better. Well, the Palestinians aren't the one creating war crimes right now. They're not the one doing crimes against humanity right now.
Wouldn't it be specific groups that align with the Palestinians that would be it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. You can't, and this is one thing I said in my solo episode I did last week. You can't just monolith a whole bunch of group of people just because of a belief system that they're around.
Yet it seems to be, to me at least, that everyone does that.
Yeah, well,
everyone from the United States all the way to China, they try to monolith groups of people
because
So that way
it's easier to
to control people.
Well, it's easier to control people. It's also, but for the average person, it's easier to just deal with people in that way. They don't have to think. And who wants to think? You know?
I do.
Yeah, you and I. But you know, for the rest of the world, we've went beyond the age of reason. So.
No, there was never an age of reason. There was just an age of more reasonable people amongst unreasonable people.
Oh, is that what it is? But speaking of this stuff for Israel. So I was watching the other day, and this commercial came up, and it was a commercial. It was basically, it was so funny because it was obviously this bunch of evangelical organization. It's like, Jesus is so great. Give money to Israel. And that's basically what the commercial was.
So you're telling me the Jews for Jesus has started a...
No, this wasn't Jews for Jesus.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
It's the Jews for Jesus.
No, this was some Christian evangelical
That's
organization.
why it has to be the Jews for Jesus.
And I'm just like, and this was only a couple days ago after everything that's gone on. I was like, yeah, that sits well.
Well, I don't know. What I do know is that the MSM have still decided that they want to be selective in how they cover shootings across the United States.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
because a couple days back, on the death day of George Floyd,
yep,
there was a drive-by shooting in which 31 rounds were fired. I believe the car came around, shot, then came around again and shot up some more, and at least I think one person...
yeah, I believe it was a BLM member.
Possibly.
That's
the funniest part about it.
Well, that's why, I mean, that's, funny as in the not getting reported is because they're not going to say that some BLM member got gunned down by other black people,
Well, of course not. That goes against their entire narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw articles today, finally, by most of the mainstream medias online. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday, when I was looking it up, when I was trying to find anything about it, when I typed in shooting, because I was figuring, oh shit, this is going to be like the most covered story ever. The first thing that came up was something that had nothing to do with it. In fact, it only had to do with the rioting in Portland or Seattle or one of those places out west that was not
right
at all George Floyd Square. That's the funny part about it, is that it was in the George Floyd Square.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they sometimes they say it's too early to make jokes, but...
Well, no.
I just see the entire thing as comedy.
Do I need to punch up the picture I found of George Floyd Square again?
No. But I mean, the entire thing would be even more comical if it wasn't a terrible situation at the same time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's...
well, I still find it comical, but that's because
sure.
I hate everybody.
There was also a shooting in San Jose,
Mm-hmm.
and I hear that's not getting as much coverage as people thought. And then there was another shooting I heard about.
Mm-hmm.
What did I say a few weeks ago? That there was going to be more coverage of shootings?
Yeah, apparently you were wrong. There's apparently less coverage of shootings.
Well, forgive me. Even though shootings are an everyday thing.
Yeah, I know, right?
Did you know you can be fined in Canada for shaking hands?
Come ticket us, fuckers.
The funny part about the video that I watched was that...
Oh, I saw the video.
The cop, if you could call him a cop, was within 6 feet of the guy that he was giving the fine to. And he should have fined himself for being within 6 feet of the individual. And they almost shook hands themselves because he was handing him the ticket. That's basically shaking hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I've said it before. I mean, I always find the whole term rule of law to be interesting because, I view rule and law to be two different things.
Sure.
And we live on, I would say we live under rule. We don't live under law. I mean, the whole thing with this, with what's been going on with the video and whatnot, and because also in Canada, you've got the, hey, little kitty, you want some ice cream?
No, my mom told me to stay away from strangers. I think I still abide by her rules. If you see a man in a machine, in a
machine.
a van, I should say, and he's trying to hand you sweets, That's when you find yourself in a stranger danger moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You need to run away from that guy as fast as possible.
Yeah. So yeah, in Canada, giving kids ice cream to give them shots.
No. First, they have to get the shot. Then they can
Oh
get
yeah,
the
that's
It's
right.
a trade.
Right.
First, I trade over my body to your experimental shot, and then you give me crappy ice cream, which is also just as bad for me as many of the free food that they're handing out to people who have gotten the shot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's because I've talked before about how society and people in general just dehumanizes kids and treats them as nothing, right? They
Sure.
treat them as pets and nothing.
They
else.
don't listen to the word of a child. Usually, the word of a child is considered worthless.
Yeah, and I was actually, and somebody was actually, I was watching somebody the other day and saying, "Oh yeah, children have inherent need for approval," and I'm like, "No, that's not true." I mean,
Some
kids,
do. But
some
that's,
do,
that's
right?
the
It's
personality of a lot of people, too.
right. And that's basically the point I was making. I mean, and this whole idea that people have that kids are unable to make decisions on their own. Whenever I work
I
with
strongly disagree with that.
Well, I mean, I've seen proof of the opposite because whenever I talk to kids, I explain, okay, because I was there for tutoring them and whatnot, and I just tell them, here's your options. You do this. This is what's likely going to happen. If you do this, this is what's likely going to happen. It's your life. You make the decision. And
I will. I want to say that at the age of 3, I was able to make decisions for myself. Okay, I was cognizant of decisions that I was making. I didn't know if they were good decisions. In fact, I would say my lack of experience probably got me into more trouble because I made bad decisions.
yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Most
Okay.
people will make bad decisions, and it was the same thing with the kids as anybody else.
I got stronger and I got wiser from all the bad decisions I did made and all the good decisions I made, and that got me to where I am today. But a child can make a decision. It's just they're not aware necessarily of the consequences
Right, because
of their decisions.
it's because the only people there's this whole thing, right? Of a kid's brain isn't fully developed, and your brain fully
degree.
develops. People don't even know what the fuck that means, and the word "develop" is such. It's not the context gets so warped in this. In this context, the word "developing" of the human brain just means growing in size. That's all it means. Now,
So I'm almost certain that as your brain gets bigger, you can process more things more quickly.
well, yeah, but that has nothing to do with the what's it called? The growing in size of the development of the brain, as it were, in the natural growth process. That happens because of the natural function of the brain, which is to optimize. Your brain is always trying to optimize for any situation that you're in. The more you do something, the better you get and the faster you get on it. That is a natural function of the brain. It doesn't matter what age you are at.
I think this is another one of those times where the English language, at the very least, is not well defined enough with words that we're using, and some of those words get redefined in such ways that they become more ambiguous.
Hold that thought. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the one thing about this whole thing with the Vidya and the doom spell and everything is, so here I was actually having a couple of thoughts the other day. First thought I was
Don't do too much of that.
yeah, I know it's so hard. Unlike my penis, but one thing I was thinking is and when it comes to dating and sex and everything like that, I was like if there was any hope or any possibility, not hope, but any possibility that I might actually date somebody or even have sex with somebody, that all went away when the doom spell came out, because now I have no idea who's taking what of all this experimental medication, and you have some of the medication which is not going to have immediate effects. It's going to have stochastic effects, which means stuff that you don't experience, but you pass on to your children.
It's going to be
and and I don't know who's got it. And then when you have the things like with the Red Cross discovering that some of these cocktails will actually destroy your natural antibodies. Well, that can spread through blood as well. So this whole largely untested, proprietary, unaccountable cocktail that's getting injected into people, regardless of whatever brand you're getting, that might just spread through even sex. So I'm just like, no.
I want to make a point here,
Right.
real quick.
Yeah, sure.
All of this talk about the vaccine
Uh-huh.
and all this crap just makes me think of the fact that Biden has been claiming so many of the things that Trump put into the works.
Right.
And in a few years from now, if there are issues, if even a few months from now,
They'll
if
be
there are
blaming
issues,
Trump.
it'll go back to Trump. Because who gets blamed for the fact that we didn't look into Wuhan, the laboratory, last year well enough?
Yeah, Trump.
Trump is getting blamed for it.
It's-
Except Trump was the one
And
who
people
brought it
won't
up
believe
publicly.
it because they're stupid.
It is the most hilarious thing I've seen the media do. Is that they are trying to backtrack their way into a position where they can't be blamed.
And the other thing,
for just
I was thinking
on any of
about,
this.
because that plays into it. What we're seeing happen right now is by far the greatest crime against humanity
Absolutely.
throughout all human history, and there are so many willing participants in it. Either by the fact that they're stupid and they spend their entire lives living by only what they're told, or just because they're authoritarian pieces of shit.
I
Then
know
a lot of
a
those
lot of
usually
people that I consider to be, in some regard, more studied on certain subjects than myself. Okay? They are, I'm not going to say they're necessarily smarter than me, but they are to a degree, at least in some degree, more intelligent in certain fields than I am.
Right.
Okay? And I think some of them can make faster connections between pattern recognition for when we play games or other things,
Right.
to get them to a quicker answer
I know one
than I can.
person you're probably talking about, but
There's a number of people
Right.
that I know that can get to these same conclusions faster than I can, and I thought that they were very, very, very intelligent type people. Okay, at my level or a little bit above me in some regards, and the way they've responded to this entire last year has really made me question if it's just certain subjects that they're better than me at, or if there's, I'm so disappointed in some of my friends and family, and
It's like people who had a choice a long time ago between having all them nice things or freedom. Of course, they chose comfort.
that basically sums it up. My brother, I thought he was a pretty smart guy. I didn't think he was as smart as myself. I thought he was better with socialization skills, and I still think he's better with socialization skills. But I think he's not tried developing his intelligence further. He's not tried studying
critical thinking habits.
Yes, and I think that's a problem I find with a lot of some of my friends who I thought were a little bit more than me because they
You have
went into
friends?
programming. Fuck you. They went into programming, and I decided that I didn't care about programming or any computer type skill field because I just thought it was boring,
Yeah.
right? So I never went into it. So on certain subjects, they seem wildly more intelligent than myself, and that's just because I don't have the knowledge of that field.
Right.
But they've made decisions that I question. It's like, are you not looking at what's happening? Are
Yeah,
you
I'm-
not seeing what's there?
I mean, because there's different.
There's different kinds of intelligence.
Right. There's different practices of intelligence.
Sure.
And critical thinking is one that's sorely.
Missing.
Yeah, in our society, but and you hit on a point. I mean, like I never, if you would have asked me a year ago, I didn't think I could get any more disappointed in humanity than I was at the time. And then the doom.
Hold up. You're telling me you were actually hopeful?
No. I thought I
But
hit
that's my
hit rock bottom of what humanity could be.
That's what I'm saying. You were hopeful that this was the rock bottom.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. And then the video came out, and then everybody's reactions to it, and and this goes to like why I am the way I am, right? Because like I talk the way I do, and act the way I do because it helps me easily weed out all the stupid people because that are more interested in performative nonsense than actual context of character.
Sure.
And this whole past year, that's all you've seen is all this performative nonsense, non-thinking, bullshit. And I'm happy because it just shows that I was right.
So this leads into my next piece of nightmare fuel. I watch a variety of different personalities on various social media platforms.
Right.
YouTube would be one of the main ones, though.
Yeah, because unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to get off YouTube.
No, but I do watch stuff on Rumble and other BitChute and here and there. And David Pakman is a person I've decided is he presents an opinion that is not what I'm thinking. So it is probably somebody I should listen to occasionally,
Right.
just to see how other people think about a situation.
Yeah.
And multiple times I see him miss the entire thing. Like he could throw a dart and he'd have hit the guy that was drinking at the bar as opposed to hitting the board.
Right.
This is one of those times I see him miss the subject completely because he is attributing the falling deaths and case counts to the fact that the vaccine has gotten to like 40% of the population has gotten two doses.
Right.
And the fact that he said 2 doses was interesting to me because there's a couple vaccines that only require 1 dose. And then he brought up that it was 60% of the population that at least got their first dose. He didn't say 1 dose. He said their first dose or something like that. So that tells me the sources he's looking at are not considering Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca or any of those other things that might be just one-shot type stuff, which is disappointing because you would think someone who seems intelligent, at least as far as how he talks, would be intelligent.
Yeah.
But he comes out and he's attributing all of this. But if you go all the way back to January, right after the 7th or something like that, the case numbers were dropping astronomically. And people were saying, well, it's not attributed to the case counts.
How do you drop astronomically?
You go from a 10 to a 7 to a 4 into a 3-1, right? It's, it's
Exponentially?
Astronomically.
Okay.
But the interesting thing I've always been noticing about with at least the data trackers is that the deaths didn't seem to climb much higher than it was when it first came out.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the whole thing like with this new virus. It's the same thing I've been saying for the past year. You don't see like the coronavirus. Big deal. There's other coronaviruses out there.
Yeah.
And you don't see people getting this all up in arms every time the rhinovirus comes out.
People
around.
keep saying that this particular coronavirus keeps mutating, and that they found more coronavirus.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I just think they keep
I remember
across.
when it first came out and it was like, oh, it mutates faster than normal. Okay, how? I'm waiting.
I've not heard anything. Bill Gates has dropped off the map, by the way.
Oh yeah, because he's not in favor with a lot of people now.
Of course. All these people that were in
That's
the news.
other thing too, right? Because like Bill Gates and Epstein and everything like that, and
Why do we trust Bill Gates?
yeah, like, well, no, but like, it's not so much Bill Gates, but like you see how there was this just blanket response from almost every politician everywhere to not actually look at science and not actually question things, but to do what this one narrative was.
Sure.
Right, and it was just making me think about like Epstein and everything, right? And it's like, well, how many people did he really have, stuff on? Because how many politicians do you really need to do all of this? What, a couple hundred?
At least.
Right? Do you think Epstein had that information on that many people?
Yes.
So,
I do. I would say he absolutely did because Bill Clinton alone had 26 flights on his private airplane.
Mm-hmm.
That speaks to a lot.
Right, but the whole idea is like Epstein apparently had dirt on a whole shitload of people, a whole shitload of high-powered politicians being compromised, and then all of a sudden you have this disease that comes out from a lab in Wuhan, which we're apparently allowed to say now, according to Facebook. Facebook has given you permission to say that. But
That's
now here's the thing, right?
Me.
Just because and just because this fucking thing comes from a lab doesn't mean that it's actually successful. I mean, people. I don't remember the last time people in general. I considered them to be competent in whatever the hell they were doing. So to think that some virus coming out of a lab is going to be, dangerous inherently.
Smart people make mistakes all the time.
Not only that, but people have just become so lazy and so, who gives a shit?
This is a great segue to my next nightmare fuel.
Yeah,
Which is hilarious.
I mean, yeah, people have become so lazy and so gives a shit. I can't even get my fucking meal the way I want it. I'm supposed to expect some fucking virus that comes out of a lab is gonna be super, engineered. Bullshit.
So I'm listening to Tim Pool earlier, and he's covering hilarious news story. Apparently, this politician in Atlanta, Georgia, stepped away from his Mercedes. This is one of those new Mercedes that has the push button.
Mm-hmm.
And he steps away from his Mercedes for 5 feet away, not even. And out of nowhere, a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, these like 4 young children, steal his car.
Must be them video games.
And he almost gets killed because he held on to the car to try and pull them out of the car or something. I don't know what he was gonna do, but he was voting for defunding the police.
Yeah, well, you have police. What is it, Minnesota, saying they're not going to respond to any crimes that aren't violent now?
Ridiculous. You need some sort of law enforcement in society to have order.
Yeah,
okay?
and it's like, so here's the whole thing, right? So because someone was saying an idea that I toyed around was like the whole idea of people just want to get rid of the police to have something else that's still the police, is just different in name. But at the same time too, you can look at it as, okay, well, if this institution is corrupt, we can get rid of this institution and replace it with all new people. But and in theory do that with something else under a different name. But how do you know that something else under a different name isn't just going to have the same people?
That is true. Here's another thing that I think is interesting. I've yet to hear anybody talk about it. I was just thinking about it just now. Why haven't we defunded all the pensions?
Well, that's happening through Wall Street because
Sure.
they're all getting invested in the hedge funds and everything. They'll have these hedge fund managers that are getting into the pensions and siphoning money off the pensions and investing them for the benefit of the pensions.
Yeah, the benefit of the pensions. And then when
quote,
someone
benefit
says
of the
your pension ran out of money.
Yeah. So another nightmare fuel. So these things kind of tie together. So I watched the Gray Zone, which I talked about before on this show. They're a good source for information, and they've had an interview recently with Steven Donziger, and this is a case that not many people are familiar with. Steven Donziger is a human rights attorney,
Okay.
and when Chevron decided, you know what, we're just going to dump a whole shitload of chemicals in the Amazon, he prosecuted them and he won because it affected they did it knowingly. It's not like, oh, it was an accident. And it was like, no, we're going to fucking dump them here. So since then, Chevron has been making this guy's life miserable. He's under house arrest right now. Chevron managed to
Because of them?
Yeah, because Chevron managed to get the federal judge to allow them to provide their own prosecuting attorney because the Attorney General's office didn't want to prosecute Chevron's case because it's basically a slap lawsuit, which has every indication of being a slap lawsuit. So the prosecution, the Attorney General was like, no, we're not going to do this. So the federal judge, which apparently was a former lawyer for the tobacco industry, allows Chevron to hire their own prosecution team to prosecute this guy in federal court. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? And it's because this guy, he exposed them dumping chemicals and whatnot. So he did an interview. It's on the Gray Zone. Go check it out. But this segues into something else, which apparently there's been a whole bunch of minerals found in the Andes in Chile, where a whole bunch of natives live. And so
What's minerals?
Copper and
valuable stuff.
Yeah. So guess what you can expect to happen soon in Chile?
The oil pipeline 2.0, except it's mining.
Something like that. But yeah, I mean the government. It's another.
What's the name
thing.
of this company? I want to invest now. It's going to be profitable.
Well, no, it's going to be action through the government probably, which usually
can't invest
is.
in the government.
Because they don't see these. It's how it is. It's the same thing with the Standing Rock and all this stuff. You don't see these people as humans because there's money to be made, right?
So there's money to be made, man.
It's just the same thing with like China and Taiwan.
Yeah.
Because Taiwan is not a country; it's a part of China.
It is definitely, quote unquote, a part of China. In the eyes of China, they own Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And in the eyes of John Cena, too. Amazing stuff.
Now, I don't expect John Cena to actually know what the fuck he's talking about because, you know.
They threatened to not show his movie in China.
Bukachi. So the whole thing with there is, so when the CCP decided to take over China, the Chinese government fled to Taiwan and established itself as an independent country. And because the CCP has so much leverage over everything, they strong-arm everybody into saying that Taiwan is just part of China.
Yes. Maybe,
Just like
maybe
Hong Kong.
the United States should do the same thing with...
Well, I mean, there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on there because you have the U.S. Arming Taiwan and...
No. I mean, the U.S. should do the same thing with other countries as well. You know,
Oh.
we should just say that...
Fuck Israel,
why
fuck
don't we just
Palestine,
say
they're ours now.
Venezuela is ours. Or let's... It's another good country we've had a lot of influence over.
Every?
Yes, the world is ours. Done. Done. There are no other countries. There's just America. We are the world.
We are the world. We are
Us
the
and
hegemon.
China. I can't forget about Russia.
You can't get away from us because we'll find you every fucking where you go.
China, Russia, and United States. Those are only countries in the entire world.
Uh-huh.
Everything else is a subsidy of other countries.
You know what else doesn't exist anymore, apparently?
What doesn't exist?
Women.
You know, I've been hearing from many people, especially TERFs, that women were disappearing. Okay? I've been hearing from a number of different sources that women will eventually just be eroded away.
Yeah, well, you know what the new term is now? Birthing person.
You see, I still disagree with that statement. I don't think women are birthing people.
I
I think they are people that give birth.
Well, no, because apparently also being a cisgender woman is now violence.
It's just like being a white male.
And this is the thing, right? Because you had a bunch of women, right, that was promoting this idea that white men bad. And what did I say before about the slottle? What's a slottle? It's someone lower on the list. It's like a dark-haired Nazi soldier, right? Because the whole Nazi belief during World War II is the Aryan race, which is blonde hair, blue eyes. So having dark hair and fighting for a belief that blonde hair and blue eyes is the perfect race.
Right.
You
So
know.
if I have brown hair and blue eyes, I'm 1 part Aryan, 1 part subhuman.
Yeah, pretty much.
What if I'm Jewish and I have blonde hair and blue eyes? Because technically, I have blonde hair and blue eyes. It's a dirty blonde, but it's a blonde hair and blue eyes. I must be of the Aryan race.
Oh, you must be Aryan Jew.
That's what they keep telling me. That's what I heard in school, and I kept on thinking, that is stupid.
Listen, you can find a slottle anywhere. I mean, you've had Jews join neo-Nazi organizations
Sure.
and everything just because they
Just
get
for
rejected. Well, not only that, it's you know, people will ostracize people for the stupidest shit, and then they'll wonder, oh, why is this person doing bad things when we treated him like shit just from the get-go because of how he or she looked. It's again, like I was,
Self-fulfilling prophecies.
yeah, like I said before, people will elect people to oppress them, and the aristocracy will inflict policies to cause revolts.
Catholicism is so upfront about the fact that you must suffer, and suffering is normal, and when you suffer, it is actually good for you.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, humility is... You don't learn humility through hubris.
I agree. I was watching this wonderful stream on Twitch yesterday, and there was a guy, and they were talking over a highly contested topic about people who give birth, the opposite of giving birth, abortion. And
Abortions only happen because the fetus deserves it.
This guy was. They were trying to pin this guy down on when does life begin. Okay, they couldn't pin this guy down on when life began.
Right.
And they then went and tried to pivot to the fact that, okay, if we can decide that this person is alive, okay, this is a person and they're alive.
Right.
Can we decide that abortion is now something you shouldn't do?
So here's the problem, right? Because the whole question is, when does life begin? Well,
Hold up. Let me finish.
Okay.
So they're trying to get this guy to agree that once they've decided that at this point life has begun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because their argument was, if we decided that it doesn't matter that it's not life before then, but we do decide that after we can all confirm that we agreed that it is life at this point, abortion would be, unless in extreme circumstances, a terrible thing to do and shouldn't be done.
Right.
Okay, and they kept on getting the guy to agree to the fact that, yes, that makes sense. And then he would, 5 seconds later, immediately backtrack and say, well, no, abortion can still be done. And I found the entire thing absolutely hilarious.
So, I mean, and it's a bullshit question. When does life begin? Because
Sure.
life, a single cell is a
It's
living
life.
organism. Yeah, it's life. It's a living organism. The actual questions is when does sentience and when does self-actualization begin?
That's a great question. One
Right,
not
beca-
for today.
Yeah, because today we're going to be talking about connotation and denotation. And one thing I wanted to start with on this topic, right? So let's talk first. Identify what connotation and denotation are, because if in case for those of you that have been listening to us for a while, part of what I want to do on this show is to have a semantic war, which is because
Semantics are great.
well, I mean, it's the people like the language you don't pay or you don't concern yourself so much with this, that, and the other thing, but the language is important. I mean
Very important.
I mean, like the Tower of Babel story, right? It's very important because look what happened when people couldn't understand each other anymore, and that's what happens in society now. And I've said this repeatedly throughout the show that people are saying things that have all these different meanings, which really mean something ambiguous. So, it's over the purpose of this episode. In this episode, we'll start with what is meant by denotation, what is meant by connotation. So, a denotation is a word as a utility, right?
I want to get dictionary definitions.
I'm going to give you the dictionary definition because this is something I teach my students all the time.
Okay, what is the first word?
Denotation. So,
Okay.
denotation. So, word. What is the function of a word? A word is meant to convey an idea, and a denotation is the word specifically as a utility. What does this word inherently mean? What is it meant to what idea is it meant to represent?
From Oxford Languages, the literal or primary meaning of a word in contrast to the feelings or ideas that the word suggests.
Right. It's not actually in contrast to, though, because connotation is what is meant by a word by the feelings or other thoughts associated with that word. And this is where a lot of the problem in society occurs, simply through language. Now, of course, we're doing this in English because we're primarily English-speaking people.
Connotation, an idea or feeling that a word invokes in addition to its literal or primary meaning.
Yeah, except it's not really an addition to, because it can be instead of. Because for example, right, if you look at the words introvert and extrovert, the connotative definition is that it's whether or not somebody who likes to be by themselves or somebody that likes to be around other people. But that's not what these words actually mean. Introvert, intro meaning internal, vert meaning turn, is somebody whose decisions are guided by their own internal mechanisms, whereas an extrovert is somebody whose decisions are guided by external mechanisms.
I would definitely say that I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
If we use that definition.
Right, and well, that's what the words actually mean, right? So you can see instantaneously where the disparity between denotation and connotation exists, because connotations become their own separate meanings and diverge from the actual meanings of the words. And this is where we have a whole lot of problems in society because nobody's speaking the same fucking language.
This is what I was talking about before, where we have a lot of problems with like the word develop and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And people keep taking their
Because develop
What-
is because develop inherently is an ambiguous term.
sure.
Right.
So is upgrade, and there's a lot of words that I like to use in conversation, and one of the things I hate doing, and it's just a thing, I just hate doing it. So I never try to do it. Is I hate repeating the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm.
I hate doing the same thing twice, which is why I'm always trying new strategies in board games. And sometimes it leads to downfalls and Concordia and crap of that nature.
Yeah, you're not like our one companion.
No,
always tries the same strategy.
He is the most boring player I've ever played against.
But it's like
winning, but it's boring.
I've talked about this before.
It's another great word, boring. What does that actually mean?
Right, like where people think like communism means that it's an oppressive regime and this, that, and
I
the
would
other
say
thing.
that is.
No, Mr. Green. Communism is just a red herring.
I would say that communism has become a word that typically is associated with
right, and that is
oppressive regimes.
That is connotation.
The idea of communism is just you're like a community of, and the reason why I say it like this is because a community can be very large or very small, but typically if someone's using community as the descriptor to describe a group of people, I would say it's probably less than like 100 people is the total size.
Well, I mean, no, you hear because you hear terms like black community and that and the other thing too.
What do you mean black community?
You'll hear terms like black community, which means like all the black people in America or whatever country.
That is not at all what that means.
What does that mean?
A group of people that are black.
Right, but it typically
doesn't mean everybody in America.
Well, no, I'm saying it's typically used to refer to like all the people in America.
These people have serious educational potholes.
Right, and that's the whole point of this episode, right?
Yes.
So now we understand what denotation is and what connotation is, and the thing is that, right, because we learn a lot of language and a lot of definitions through other people's use of words, this is how connotations spread and get and become misconceptions of denotations in actual words. And I'm always finding words that, I thought mean one thing and actually turns out means something else. It's just the way I've heard them used throughout the years. It turns out that they've been using completely wrong. Like we were talking about the word smart.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and one question I wanted to ask is, so where do you think it would be beneficial to stick to denotation, and where do you think it would be beneficial to use connotation?
So connotation versus denotation, that being the difference being between them, feelings versus definitions.
Well, association also.
So I'm giving a very generalized view of it. I would say if you're within a group of friends, okay, words take on new meaning because you develop events, rather not develop. You have events that occur to you and those group of people who you may or may not call friends.
Right.
And so new words
I just call them associates. I don't have friends.
Thank God.
Fuck you people.
Thank God. Suddenly those words now have new connotations because of that. Right.
It's the whole inside jokes, inside stories, and this stuff.
So connotations are fantastic when you're using those definitions amongst friends or family or work coworkers that on a very good level. You deal with them in your daily life, or you used to deal with them on a much more daily basis,
right,
or weekly basis, such that those
on a regular basis.
What?
On a regular basis.
Sure.
Say.
Such that those words can take on new meaning that is exclusively known to you.
Right.
Now, the problem becomes, and this is because of the way that people are teaching people now, which I don't really think it's really teaching. I think they're just telling people what to do, and those people are learning that this is what we have to do.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so because of that, denotation, which is in almost any setting outside of friends and family, if you're petitioning something to the government or you're trying to set a rule of law, 2 words.
Fuck you, Greg.
You're trying to create a new law for the country or a community of some sort. You should never be using connotation to define how the law works. Okay, you shouldn't be using connotation if you're a lawyer, unless you're explaining something to the jury to explain why something happened.
And see, we can even see an example of this in the First Amendment of the Constitution because we have the freedom of the press. Well, what the fuck does that even mean?
I don't even know. Are they specifically referring to the printing press?
Yeah, I mean, some people saying it's the ability to reproduce information.
I think that the word they chose, the freedom of the press, was the right word at the time that they used it.
Right, because it was the connotation.
Wrong word in this age of information that we have right now.
Right, it's not something that lasts the test of time.
There's the the idea behind it was a very well thought out idea.
Just the wording was poorly chosen.
Yes.
Much like, well,
the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment has some of the worst wording, because the wording at the time was very, very, very not strong. It was relevant. That's the word.
Right.
It was very relevant because we had not as much your typical police department, because that really wasn't, that didn't exist. I would say at that time, that period in time, there were typically militias or guards.
Right.
People that performed the role of what you would commonly associate the police with today, but they weren't necessarily referred to as the police.
Right, and
right?
it's again the whole idea that I say repeatedly is that brevity is only the soul of wit if you correctly get your idea across, or completely get your idea across.
Yeah, I find that to be a problem consistently with some of the people I associate. Is that I say an idea, I'm trying to use the definition of the word, the denotation of the word to get my idea across, and consistently someone misunderstands what I'm actually saying.
I'm sorry, what were you saying, Greg?
Exactly, you fool. And they try to twist the words to
suit their connotation.
Yes.
That's usually what it is.
It's very upsetting because I want to express an idea, and I want to make certain they understand the idea, so I am alluding to the fact that it is the definition, or I'm saying that it is the definition. I'm trying to get to the root of the word so that way they understand what it is. And I guess not as many people understand the definition as it is as much as I thought it was.
Yeah, so I mean, the question is like how it's really impossible to tell whether or not your understanding of a word is the connotative meaning or the denotative meaning until you come to that point of error where there's a mismatch between what you say, what you intend to say, and what somebody else thinks you intend to say.
So I watch a lot of Crowder, especially his
Trey Crowder.
Loudorf Crowder. I watch a lot of his debates that he has with.
There's a Trey Crowder.
Sure.
He's called the liberal redneck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
So I watch his stuff where he does Change My Mind segments, and I find these to be amongst the most engaging because his whole thing is that he's trying to challenge a younger person to try and change his mind, okay? Knowingly that the person who he's going to be talking to is probably not going to have as good of a knowledge basis as him.
Right.
And I would say his goal of the entire thing is to try and get people to think about what they previously thought. Because he's trying to, I would guess, change their mind by trying to get them to change his mind.
That's the whole thing of why I say, like, I never try to argue a point. I always simply ask why and how.
The point of me bringing that up is because at the beginning of any one of the little debates that they have,
right,
if there is a word or words that are ambiguous as to how it could be used, he asks them to define it,
right,
and then he defines it,
right,
and they try to come to an agreed definition for the conversation that they're about
and see,
to
that's
have.
actually a good way of going through things because part of communication is that semantic agreement. So I'll make fun of Red. I was hoping she'd be here for the episode, but I'll just make fun of her while she's not here. Right, she was referring to a bureaucracy, right, and her ideas on what a bureaucracy is. But what a bureaucracy is just a controlled by appointed officials rather than elected representatives.
What's most government buildings?
Right, that's most functions and whatnot. And she has this idea of a bureaucracy inherently being designed to empower itself and whatnot, and that doesn't jive with the definition. That becomes a connotative association.
I would agree with her that bureaucracies tend to empower themselves.
Yeah,
but I don't
tend
believe,
to, but not the definition
not
and
because
purpose.
bureaucracy's goal is to empower itself. Bureaucracy is not to empower itself. It just so happens that a lot of people are very ambitious and they are very self-centered, and so they want to get power, and so they use bureaucracy because bureaucracy has a lot of rules that are defined as to how they can do things.
Right, which is one thing I pointed out to her in a previous episode, which I'm guessing she forgot. And maybe she'll listen to this episode and be like, oh, maybe he did explain that. So here's
but
another
that's
word.
the problem with rules themselves, is that once someone learns a set of rules,
Mm-hmm.
they can then use the connotation of words within the set of rules to manipulate the system.
Right.
Because, well, maybe that was how the person was using.
Mm-hmm.
It's disgusting.
Then another word with heavy connotation associated from disassociated from the denotation is government,
Oh yes.
right? Because people will say the government this, that, and the other thing. Well, what does government actually mean? It's just the body that governs. So, and as I say, to say that the government is inherently bad is like saying a hammer is inherently bad because somebody tried to hammer in a screw with it.
Well, this is an argument I made in a paper I did long ago. I did a paper on do video games cause people to become more violent or with guns and such. This was I was in high school. My high school was on a college campus, and so I was taking a psychology course as an elective for one of my spots in school, right?
Yeah.
And so I did a paper, and in the paper I discussed the fact that it is more of the environment around people that causes them to do what they do than a video game itself.
It's
Video
whether
game-
so well we can talk. I'll go briefly on this because that's more of whether or not how much a person's actual needs are being met versus what they have available to them. That's the typical instigator of violence, outside of so the social environment. But as far as video games themselves, just because I want to say this because this is a stupid thing that's always brought up, the video games. Let me put it this way, which is people will say, oh, well, after such and such video games out, then more violence in this area happens,
There's
right?
no proof of that.
Well, no. Even if that is the case, that is corollary, right?
Sure.
That's not causatory. If you want to take now, which corollary evidence would you think holds stronger weight? Something like that, or something like a study that shows that when people play video games, they produce the same amount of dopamine as if they would doing anything else like watching TV or reading a book or playing sports. Which
I
one?
believe the study.
Yeah, that would have more pertinent corollary evidence, right?
As long as the study is peer reviewed and they didn't, make any glaring,
right.
very obvious biases in the study itself.
Assuming that they're all peer reviewed and there were no biases, right? But even still, that's not so much of a study; it's more of a measurement, right?
Sure.
So it's just statistic gathering in both cases, right? But people, and that's part of where the problem with connotation and denotation lies, because people want to go with the definition that they believe it should be because they learned it that way or they heard it that way, rather than actually believing, oh, I understood it wrong, right?
It's funny about statistics, because statistics can be used connotatively or denotatively as well, and
right. Here's my favorite thing about statistics, right? People say numbers don't lie.
they
Okay,
don't.
right? So, and they'll have like a number. You can have something there that says 50 people. Well, what's that letter P there? Is that a number? What about that letter E? Is that a number? What about that letter O? Is that a number?
What?
No, because they say numbers don't lie, right? But if the statistic says 50 people, well, P is not a number, E is not a number, O is not a number, the other P is
Who
not.
the fuck is doing this? Who have you talked to that's actually doing that?
No, I would do this.
Get the fuck out of here, man.
The whole point. But it's the promotion of the idea of, right, numbers don't lie. Well, a number by itself can't lie because it's just a number. It's not saying anything.
The problem with a statistic is that.
Well, hold on. Let me finish my thought. Because you're probably going to say the same thing that I'm going to say, right? Because the instant somebody says you have the number 50 there, but somebody else put the word people to that number 50, right? That's not necessarily. So right there, then now somebody else is assigning a meaning to that number 50, right? And that number 50 might have had a different meaning.
It might have. I would say it probably didn't. I typically see most statistics are pretty well done. The problem with the statistics is that the study in which the statistic is made is flawed or it's purposefully
And also,
lacking.
99% of all statistics are made up.
Look, don't quote Snapple caps to me. Okay? Do not quote Snapple caps to me. There was a Snapple cap that said...
Yeah.
Anyways.
But the idea is right. That plays into the idea of connotation and denotation, where people want to assign definitions to even something, or want to assign a meaning to a statistic without it inherently being there.
But okay, so the statistic would be, if I took 4 people and I asked all 4 of them, do you like cheese?
Mm-hmm.
And all 4 of them said yes, then I could say 100% of people like cheese.
I could also
Except
say
it's there's
right.
There's connotation to that 100% of people. It's this study only contained 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
Do not use to make a general assessment of people at large.
Well, I wouldn't say the connotation. That's caveat.
Okay, fine.
All right.
Whatever.
Come on, we're in a semantic war here.
Fuck you. Fuck you.
I would expect you to correct me just the same. So
Definitely not. I would definitely not.
it's because you're a lazy fuck.
I might be lazy. You're right. I am incredibly. I have an incredible work ethic until I don't.
Is that like 60% of the time it works 90% of the time?
No. 90% of the time I work. 75% is hard.
Is that like I don't give 110% to everything except donating blood?
Look, I don't know how you can give 110% of your blood, but okay. I'm just saying, there is no 110% of your own blood, unless you've set it aside.
You're producing it as you're expelling it.
If you've produced blood, you've set it aside for a special occasion. Could you do that? You could do that, right?
Yeah.
How long does blood stay good for?
A couple days.
Oh, that's
Like refrigerated lasts for like I think 3 days.
That's a shame. I was gonna siphon away blood, store it in a fridge, in a freezer, hold it. And then years later, when I needed it because I was dying from gunshot wounds or something.
Well, you're not the energy vampire in the group anyway, so you're not the Colin Robinson, or the Colin Robinson, or the Colin Robinson.
What about the culling Robinson?
So let's talk about some other popular words that their denotations kind of stray. Their denotations and connotations kind of stray far apart. What would you say?
I feel very strongly that just your small words are. It's not specific small words, but it's like people will use just general words in conversations to like even general is
Well, let's pick some big words then. Like some. So here's another word, right? Anarchy, right?
Okay.
If you look at the word anarchy, right, it means without government.
Sure, but so it's a problem I have with anarchy to begin with is that inevitably when I look at most groups of people, I cannot imagine a scenario in which there is not a form of government.
Right, and see that's exactly the thing. And this,
I just don't believe anarchy is a real thing.
Right,
and
it's not something that you can attain, right? Because this goes. Remember, we were having the "you shall not" episode,
yes.
right? So it's another you cannot not have government, because if you decide everybody, if everybody comes together and decides there are going to be no rules, well then they've just created a government.
Yes, but okay, so the exception to the rule of there cannot be a government is the one in which there is no government, except by having no government, you've created a government of no government. Okay?
Right, but what is a government? A government is the ruling body.
Yes.
Right? So if everybody gets together and decides we're not going to have any rules, then they are the ruling body.
I believe an anarchy can exist in very small pockets at a time. But let me explain.
Go ahead, try it.
Okay, let me explain. It exists for very few seconds. Okay? Very, very few seconds. Okay? It's when there's complete chaos where everyone is shouting at each other, when everyone is trying to do something.
Then everyone's passively agreeing that the ruling body of government is the everybody shouting at each other.
No, they haven't agreed to anything. All they know. Okay, so you're using. I'm
being strictly denotative here.
I get you. But okay, so it's for the few seconds in which everyone starts shouting at each other, for the few seconds before it becomes just complete chaos, where everyone's shouting at each other, no one can decide on what is the correct thing to do. And so there was no government at that time. After those first few seconds, where it is decided upon, without even knowing it, that the rule is whoever shouts the loudest and makes their voice heard is the one who will get their point across. Then a government has evolved in that if I shout the loudest, I will get my voice across. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will work. But that is the new government that has just been put into place. But before it gets to that point, nobody knows what the hell is happening, and everyone's shouting at each other. Okay? And then suddenly they realize, without realizing it, it's a subconscious thing, is that the only way to be heard is to be louder than the other person.
Okay, so here's how I'm going to poke holes. I'll start by poking holes by asking you a question.
Sure.
Does something being a subconscious action make it any less viable than a conscious action?
It makes it no more viable or less viable.
Okay, so equal playing field, right?
It's an equal playing field.
Okay, so at this point of everybody not knowing or deciding what to do, is that the stance of the governing body not knowing or deciding what to do?
No, because there is no governing body.
Really?
There is no governing body before. Okay, so
okay.
Let's put it this way.
Who's in charge of the idea that nobody knows what to do?
Nobody.
Nobody's in charge of the idea.
Correct.
And yet they're all participating in the same idea.
Nobody is aware of that existing, and then suddenly.
Okay. Regardless of whether or not they're aware,
we are talking about an infinitesimal small amount of time.
The awareness level is inconsequential, right? Because the action is what we're concerned with
Charles,
here.
The amount of time that there is no government is so small as if it almost doesn't exist. Okay? We are talking about a microsecond.
Are people still taking an action by inaction?
That is different. That is different than this.
How?
Before
maybe you people at home.
The transition.
Hold on, you people might be learning something right now.
Between the transition of one government and another government, there is no government. Okay.
How?
What do you mean how? It's a transition point.
Okay.
It's a very small transition.
Right.
Point.
You know what the definition of a point is? It's something of infinite smallness.
We are talking about. The rule was that everybody took turns talking.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that a point it doesn't have three areas. It just has
it just happens.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay. Anarchy only exists as a point in time.
But a point is not something that has actual area or mass.
That is why it's the exception. It is so small of a point in time.
So something so small doesn't exist. So something so small that doesn't actually exist seems to exist.
It's a small exception to the rule. Realistically, I don't believe anarchy can work ever.
It can't. Anarchy can't exist.
Someone will always decide, I want to be the person who's in charge. I want to bring order to this entire situation.
Right. And so it's like the discussion we were having the other day, right? You cannot not be political, right? Because every action...
said what you can.
Right.
You disagreed.
No, you cannot not be political.
You disagreed with
right because every action you take is whether or not you agree or disagree with somebody else, their explicit or implicit or non-existent political opinion.
I believe you can be not political, but you cannot be you cannot have no ideology. Someone will always have an ideology. Okay? The ideology will always exist.
Okay, let's shelve that because we need to get back to this government anarchy thing, right? Because here's the thing, right? Because we got to look at and this is why the semantics are so important. We got to look at what a government means denotatively and what anarchy means denotatively.
An anarchy is a government of no government.
Well, anarchy means without rule. Okay, prefix an, archy, word archy, it's Greek. So no, or without rule, right? So if people are sitting there...
People have defined... I get what you're saying. People have defined the rule by there being no real rule. Okay? That is a rule in and of itself.
Exactly.
Okay? But that is why there's always an exception to the rule. Okay? Which is a rule in of itself that is the exception to the fact that there is always a rule.
That is the most circular, retarded shit I've ever heard.
There's an exception to every rule.
Uh-huh.
Except for that rule.
But I mean, this is why I like having these, because this is the kind of shit I think about all the fucking time, right? Just looking through the semantics of things and having these thoughts of what can and cannot be, simply because of how they are, right? So in a government, right, we talk about government, it just means body that governs. That's all that government means. So if you have a bunch of people that are like, well, I don't know what the fuck to do, well, they're all the body that's governing, not knowing what the fuck to do.
They've decided that the way to rule is to not know what to do.
Exactly.
And to fly by the seat of their pants.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that is the U.S. government in some regards right now. That is the UK government. Amongst a number of... I would say China has a better idea of how they should run things than the United States does right now.
Well, I think they have a better idea of how they want to run things. The word should is... is subjective.
Shoulds and wants are very similar in some regard.
Right.
Some regard.
Oh, wasn't that a fun little journey, Greg?
Sure, it was a great journey. I think I proved you wrong, but you think you proved me wrong. Moving on. I've never seen a group of people that doesn't eventually default to, this guy has power, this guy enforces this guy's power, and these people, you can't even see them, they're off the screen. Mm-hmm. They listen to this guy and this guy. Mm-hmm. So there is always going to be a power structure within every group. And I find it interesting that people think that there would never be a power structure within any group at any time.
Right. I mean, even if you had a single person, well, a single person isn't an anarchy, and a single person is an autocracy.
No, but that's why I think communism is a stupid idea.
Well,
because
I mean,
the way people connotatively use it is impossible. It would never exist. It could not work. Socialism, also connotatively, would never work. It cannot exist. The way
except for nobody can agree on what those connotative meanings are.
No, but even the way... Okay, yeah, I've listened to 5 different people try to explain it in 5 different ways, and then another 5 different people explain it in another 5 different ways.
So hold on. Before we get into the connotation, let's look at them denotatively, right? Communism, right? You break it down. Commune and ism. So ism is...
Or community and ism.
Right. Well... Community comes from the word commune.
I probably would say it was commune and ism.
Community comes from the word commune.
Okay.
Okay, so what does the suffix ism mean? It means in terms of whatever the base word is, right? So in terms of a community, right? Well, what the fuck does that actually mean?
Well, commune is a group of people that...
live together.
Yes.
That's it.
And they basically...
That does not explicitly mean any sort of hierarchical or economic structure at all.
Typically a commune is a...
Well,
I'm saying it like this.
The way that it's been practiced, that's what you're going with.
The way a commune is typically practiced is that it is a small group of people, usually no bigger than, I would say, 50.
Yeah, that share resources and workloads and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe a couple or fewer houses.
Right, but that's not necessarily... But that you can have communes that operate in different ways.
You can.
Like look at the Waco cult, right?
Sure.
Technically, it was a commune, but it was a hierarchy. Look at the...
But every commune...
If you look at the Occupy Wall Street movement, right?
Hold up. Every commune has a hierarchy. Every society has a hierarchy.
Well, yeah.
Whether the hierarchy is blatant or subtle is the difference.
Well, okay? I mean, the Occupy Wall Street movement was a pure democracy, which means nothing happened unless everybody voted for it to happen.
Right, but that was a hierarchy within itself. It was the hierarchy of the mob. The mob decided...
Right, well, democracy means every person rule, every rule, right?
Who came up with the questions that they were asking?
That's an interesting. So, is asking a question a form of establishing a hierarchy? That's a good question. We should probably explore that in a future episode.
Absolutely. So when I think about,
But hold on, let me just finish what I was saying. So like Waco was
oh boy.
Waco was a blatant hierarchical commune.
Sure.
Occupy was a purely democratic commune. That's really what they were.
Yes.
So they operated in completely different manners.
I've heard Tim Pool go on about the way they did the whole Occupy Wall Street, because he was there, he recorded it, he even I think got recognized by Time Magazine for the work that he did for.
This was before it was bulldozed.
Right. The interesting thing I found about that is that Tim Pool is basically he's an Asian American,
Right.
even though he looks like a white guy.
Right.
Okay, but if he didn't agree with their ideas,
What does the Asian American really mean?
wow, you gotta go even there. It was going on that if he didn't agree with their ideas, he was a white guy. But if he did agree with their ideas, he was allowed to have all of his ethnic background attributed to him. And I thought that was very interesting. It's just
Right.
terrible.
Yeah. Well, people are terrible, regardless of what their cause.
Thank you.
Which is the whole point of this show.
Absolutely
That
terrible.
We're terrible. Greg and I are terrible. Red's terrible. You're all terrible, especially for listening. Why the fuck are you even listening to us? We don't know.
We say interesting, entertaining points of view, or maybe we just say boring, unentertaining points of view that you just dislike. Subscribe.
Maybe
share,
it's all the
comment,
people I've been
dislike
driving.
again.
Maybe it's all the people I've been bribing with sexual favors.
Wow, that's pretty shitty. Are you
Yeah.
only talking to one person?
Well, I mean, my sexual favors would be pretty shitty, but you know.
You're just a shitty person.
I am I'm a horrible human being,
I will clink to that.
and I never want to be anything but. Because the instant I am not a horrible human being,
Horrible
it means
meaning.
yeah. The instant I am not a horrible human being, I'm probably catching the kind of attention I don't want to catch. Final thought?
My final thought is that if you have a conversation with anybody that turns into a debate, remember that before you get into the weeds of the entire conversation, you should be sure that the way you're speaking is clearly understood by the person you're speaking to, or else you will end up talking past each other, because they'll assume that you mean one thing, and you'll keep assuming that they are correctly believing the way you're saying it. And no one will accomplish anything except anger from both sides.
My final thought is, fuck that noise. Just get the biggest stick to beat the other person with, because I don't want to see you all kill each other.
Power overwhelming!
But that's it for this episode. Be sure to check out our next episode, which is titled Fiscal Fuckery. Or not. You know, fuck you either way.
Remember to find us on Locals, BitChute, Minds, and Rumble to check out our alt-tech extras. With that said, once again, I am Greg.
And I am Charles.
Remember to never question.
Never ask for proof.
And always believe what you're told by the news and politicians.
No matter what. Now go back to sleep, fuckers. Good night, fellow human. You'll wake up tomorrow to cause more destruction and bring much more sorrow. You'll go out and smile and pretend you are good. But once you get crossed, you'll don a black hood. You'll maim and you'll rend, all while you pretend that you are some kind of hero. You can't face the truth, and you'll stay aloof to the fact that you're a zero. You'll sit and stay glued to a spoon-feeding tube so that you can believe you're the best. You'll obey and be bribed by a campaigner's lies. All throughout the COVID Murder Fest. I hate you all.